Today, you are going to discover a quiet, almost forgotten way to support tired, stiff joints using something that already sits in your kitchen bin most mornings, the humble eggshell. It sounds like nothing more than waste, but it carries a mineral story that most people never stop to consider. And today, that story is going to unfold slowly, gently, right alongside you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. In the minutes ahead, simple pairings, easy preparation, and honest knowledge come together into something genuinely worth trying. Here is a small fact worth resting on for a moment. Eggshell is almost entirely calcium carbonate, the very mineral compound that gives bone its structure and its quiet strength. Most people crack an egg, use what's inside, and toss the shell without a second glance. What looks like nothing more than kitchen debris is, in truth, one of the most concentrated, most overlooked sources of a mineral that the joints and bones lean on every single day of a person's life. Joints are not simple hinges sitting quietly inside the body. Every joint is wrapped in cartilage, cushioned by fluid, and held together by connective tissue. And every one of those structures depends, in some way, on the very same handful of minerals that build bone in the first place. Calcium sits at the center of that picture, but it rarely works alone. This is exactly why the pairings you'll hear throughout this story matter just as much as the eggshell itself. Turmeric enters the picture here, and it deserves its own quiet introduction. Golden, warm, faintly bitter, turmeric spent centuries in kitchens long before anyone ever used the word anti-inflammatory out loud. Paired with a pinch of black pepper, its most active compound becomes far easier for the body to actually use, a small detail worth remembering, since black pepper's presence here is not an accident, but a deliberate, time-tested pairing passed down through generations of careful cooks. Ginger joins this same gentle circle. Warming, slightly sharp, it has long accompanied turmeric in traditional kitchens the world over. The two of them almost always reaching for each other, as though one naturally calls for the other. Together they build a foundation that the eggshell's calcium can rest upon, rather than working in isolation the way it is so often imagined to work. There is something worth sitting with here, tiny against enormous. A single eggshell weighs only a few grams, barely enough to notice in the palm of your hand, and yet the joints it may quietly support carry an entire body, every single day, for an entire lifetime, through every step, every stair, every ordinary errand that asks more of the knees and hips than anyone ever really stops to appreciate. Understanding how eggshell might support the joints begins with understanding calcium itself, one of the most essential and most quietly overlooked minerals in ordinary daily nutrition. Calcium forms the very structure of bone, giving it density and strength, while also playing a steady background role in how muscles fire and how the body's cells communicate with one another. The body relies entirely on food to supply this mineral, day after day, across an entire lifetime, with no internal factory able to manufacture it from nothing. This is exactly why natural sources of calcium, even unexpected ones, like a clean, well-prepared eggshell, deserve real attention, rather than a quick dismissal as something too ordinary to matter. Joints, much like bone itself, are living tissue, not fixed and unchanging structures. Cartilage wears a little thinner with each passing year, a natural and universal part of growing older, the same gentle way skin softens and hair lightens over time. This is not a flaw to fear, but simply the honest unfolding of years, and it is precisely why a small, steady, affordable habit, rather than any dramatic intervention, tends to serve this particular part of the body best. Preparing the shell begins the same simple way it always has, in kitchens all over the world, for longer than anyone can really trace. Shells from about 6 eggs, rinsed clean under cool water, scrubbed gently with a little baking soda to lift away any last trace of residue clinging to the surface. A short boil, roughly 10 minutes in a small pot of water, followed by a stretch in a moderate oven, somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes, until the shells turn pale, dry, and easy to crumble between two fingers. Once cooled, into a small coffee or spice grinder they go. Ground patiently until only a fine, soft powder remains, almost like flour. Nothing rough or gritty left behind to notice on the tongue. This is where turmeric and ginger join the shell powder directly, rather than being added later as an afterthought, while the shells are still faintly warm from the oven. A small measure of dried, ground turmeric and ground ginger is folded straight into the mixture before the final grind, along with the faintest pinch of black pepper, barely a dusting, just enough to do its quiet work. The result is a single jar of golden-flecked powder, calcium and warming spice, sitting together from the very beginning, rather than measured out separately every single time, stored afterward in a small, sealed jar, tucked away from steam and moisture, perhaps in a cupboard, rather than left sitting near a stove. This powder keeps comfortably for months, ready in small amounts whenever the body seems to be quietly asking for a little extra care and attention. A quarter teaspoon of this blend, stirred into a small glass of warm water with a squeeze of lemon, makes one of the simplest possible ways to begin this habit. The lemon's gentle acidity softens the mineral taste and appears to make calcium easier for the body to take up, while the turmeric lends its familiar golden warmth to the glass, turning a plain glass of water into something that almost feels like a small ritual in its own right. Morning, alongside breakfast, tends to suit this particular version best, a quiet handful of minutes before the rest of the day begins to move at its usual pace. The story behind pairing eggshell with warming spices is far older than it might first appear on the surface. In kitchens without refrigeration, without supplement aisles, without any of the small conveniences taken so completely for granted today, resourceful cooks understood instinctively that nothing useful should ever be wasted, and that food worked best gathered together rather than used alone. Turmeric and ginger were reached for constantly, not as a passing trend, but as an old, quiet habit, folded into porridge, tea, and broth long before anyone ever measured a single compound in a laboratory setting. Today, you are going to discover a quiet, almost forgotten way to support tired, stiff joints using something that already sits in your kitchen bin most mornings, the humble eggshell. It sounds like nothing more than waste, but it carries a mineral story that most people never stop to consider. And today, that story is unfolding slowly, gently, right alongside you. Thank you again for sharing this time. In the part still ahead, more pairings, more easy preparation, and more of this same honest knowledge continue to unfold, one gentle step at a time. There is a gentle piece of chemistry worth knowing here as well, one that quietly connects an ordinary kitchen to something far more familiar than it first appears. The same calcium carbonate that fills an eggshell is the very compound found in many everyday tablets people reach for to calm an unsettled stomach. This is simply what calcium carbonate does chemically. Nothing exotic, nothing invented, just a familiar, ordinary compound recognized and used elsewhere in daily life, hiding in plain sight inside something most people throw away without a second thought. Apple cider vinegar enters the story here, and its role is a quiet, practical one, worth understanding on its own terms. A small amount of raw, unfiltered vinegar, stirred together with a spoonful of the eggshell turmeric powder and a little honey to soften its sharpness, creates a simple tonic that many households have leaned on for generations, long before it carried any particular name or reputation at all. The gentle acidity works alongside the shell's calcium in much the same way lemon does, easing the mineral into something the body finds simple and comfortable to use. Honey earns its place here too, not just for sweetness, but for what it quietly does to an otherwise sharp mineral mixture, softening it into something genuinely pleasant to sip, rather than something to force down out of duty or obligation. A small spoonful, warmed slightly, blended with the vinegar and the powder, becomes a tonic that many people find comfortable enough to return to several mornings a week. almost without thinking about it after a little while. Bones and joints share far more in common than people often realize at first glance. Cartilage, the smooth, cushioning tissue that lets a knee bend without friction or discomfort, relies on many of the same building blocks that keep bone dense and strong throughout an entire lifetime. Calcium plays its part quietly in the background of that entire system, a steady, patient contributor rather than any single dramatic fix arriving all at once. There is a rhythm worth understanding in how joints age across the years, one that deserves patience rather than worry. Cartilage wears a little thinner with each passing year, a natural and universal part of getting older, the same unhurried way skin softens and hair lightens with time. This is not a flaw to fear, but simply the honest unfolding of years passing, and it is precisely why a small, steady, affordable habit, rather than any dramatic intervention, tends to serve this particular part of the body far better in the long run. The preparation stays exactly as simple as before. Nothing added, nothing complicated. 6 shells, cleaned, boiled briefly, dried in a moderate oven, ground into a fine powder alongside the turmeric and ginger already described earlier. From that single jar, both the lemon water version from before and this new honey vinegar tonic can be made, whichever fits the particular moment better on any given day. For anyone easing into this habit for the very first time, starting smaller, perhaps 1/8 of a teaspoon rather than a full quarter, is a comfortable way to grow familiar with the taste and the ritual before settling into a steadier, more regular rhythm. There is no fixed number that suits everyone equally, and listening carefully to what feels right for an individual routine matters far more than following any strict rule written down somewhere. A warm cup of tea offers another easy home for this same jar of powder. A 1/4 teaspoon stirred into chamomile or ginger tea in the evening, alongside a little honey, becomes a calming, familiar ritual before rest. 2 gentle habits meeting quietly in one warm cup, echoing the same kind of evening routine countless households have leaned on for generations, long before anyone ever spoke of calcium or turmeric in scientific terms at all. Carrot joins the story here as well, bringing its own quiet contribution of vitamin A and gentle fiber. A familiar vegetable most kitchens already keep close at hand without a second thought. Grated finely and stirred into a small glass of fresh juice alongside a pinch of the eggshell ginger powder, it becomes an easy, colorful way to fold this habit into an already ordinary routine, especially around lunchtime, when a lighter, brighter drink often feels welcome after a long morning. It helps to know which shells suit this whole process best. Shells from fresh, properly refrigerated eggs, used within a few days of cracking, rather than left sitting around the kitchen for too long. Keep the entire process simple and pleasant from beginning to end. A light rinse right after cracking, clearing away any last trace of egg white still clinging to the inside, makes the later cleaning quicker and far less of a chore later on. None of this calls for anything an ordinary kitchen doesn't already have sitting somewhere in a drawer or cupboard. A grinder, a baking sheet, a small pot for boiling, a sealed jar for storage. Nothing more elaborate than that stands between an average kitchen and this entire quiet habit, start to finish. Baked goods offer another quiet way to fold this powder into daily meals, without changing anything about how a household already eats from day to day. A 1/2 teaspoon stirred into muffin batter, pancake mix, or a loaf of bread disappears completely once baked, leaving no trace in taste or texture behind, while still carrying its calcium and its warming spice quietly into the finished food on the table. Sesame seeds bring their own quiet reputation here, small and unassuming, yet carrying a notable amount of calcium in their own right, tucked inside something most people barely think twice about. Toasted lightly and ground alongside a spoonful of the eggshell powder, they create a coarse, nutty blend that can be sprinkled over a salad, stirred into yogurt, or folded into a bowl of rice, adding both texture and a second, complementary source of the very same mineral the eggshell already provides on its own. A simple homemade dressing offers a natural home for this particular pairing. Whisk together with olive oil, a little lemon juice, and a pinch of the sesame eggshell blend. Nothing more complicated than that. Poured over a bowl of fresh greens. This becomes an easy, practical way to fold a mineral-rich habit into an ordinary lunch or dinner, especially satisfying alongside a colorful plate of vegetables already on the table. For anyone who prefers the plainest version of all, a small glass of water with a squeeze of lemon and a quarter teaspoon of the plain eggshell powder, without any of the spice blends mixed in, offers the gentlest possible way to begin, free of any other flavor, suited to anyone easing into the idea slowly, or anyone who simply prefers plain simplicity over a more elaborate recipe with more steps involved. Walnuts join the story here too. A small handful crushed and stirred into a bowl of oatmeal alongside a quarter teaspoon of the eggshell cinnamon powder. The two textures, soft oats and crunchy walnut, playing pleasantly against one another in the same bowl. Cinnamon lends its familiar warmth to the same jar, folded in during the final grind alongside the turmeric described earlier, giving the whole blend a comforting, faintly sweet character that suits a morning bowl especially well, particularly on colder mornings. As for how much and how often, a quarter to half a teaspoon of any of these blends, once a day or every couple of days, sits comfortably within a varied, balanced routine for most people going about ordinary life. Enjoying it alongside a meal rather than on its own tends to feel most natural, and a steady, modest rhythm serves this habit far better than a large amount taken all at once out of impatience. Anyone with particular dietary needs or existing mineral considerations worth being careful about benefits from personal guidance suited to their own individual routine, and that kind of thoughtful, careful attention always fits comfortably alongside a habit like this one. Savory dishes welcome this powder just as easily as sweet ones do, without any real difference in how well it disappears into the finished dish. A pinch stirred into a pot of soup or stew near the end of cooking blends in seamlessly, adding its mineral contribution to a lunch or dinner, using only what is already being prepared in the kitchen that day. No extra trip to the store required at all. There is one final, simple way to use this jar worth mentioning before closing this particular story. A light massage oil, made by warming a small amount of olive oil with a pinch of the ginger turmeric eggshell blend and a few drops of lemon, cooled slightly, then worked gently into tired knees or hands after a long day on your feet. This is not a replacement for anything the body genuinely needs from within, only a small, comforting ritual that many people find pleasant at the end of a long day. Warmth and gentle pressure meeting a familiar homemade blend prepared with your own two hands. Bringing the most useful ideas together now, this whole habit really rests on three simple pillars, easy to remember and easy to return to. First, the preparation. Washing, boiling, baking, and grinding the shells into a fine powder. Folding in turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, or sesame depending on preference. Then storing the finished blend in a small sealed jar for months of easy, ready-made use. Second, a comfortable daily or near-daily amount, roughly a quarter to half a teaspoon, folded quietly into a familiar food or drink already enjoyed most days anyway. Third, pairing that habit with everything else that already supports the joints. Gentle movement, a varied diet, and a little patience, since nothing here works as a single dramatic fix, but as one steady thread among many woven together over time. There is real comfort in seeing eggshell this way, as one small, affordable part of a much larger, ongoing habit, rather than a single solution to remember perfectly every single day. It asks for a little patience during preparation and a little restraint during use, gathered gently over time rather than all at once in a rush. That unhurried rhythm is exactly what makes it sustainable, the kind of quiet habit that fits easily around an ordinary kitchen and an ordinary budget, week after week, month after month, without ever feeling like a burden. So the picture comes together now, warmly and honestly, the way it was always meant to. Eggshell offers a genuine, concentrated source of calcium, the same mineral bones and joints lean on every single day of an ordinary life. Turmeric, ginger, and their quiet companions add their own complementary support alongside it, each playing its own small part. The preparation, once learned, becomes second nature almost without noticing, turning something once thrown away without a thought into something quietly valuable instead. And its simple versatility means it fits into tea, tonic, dressing, and oatmeal alike, asking for little more than a bit of patience and an ordinary coffee grinder sitting on the counter. Thank you, sincerely, for spending this time here today and for giving such an overlooked ingredient such thoughtful, patient attention. The simple eggshell, pale and unassuming, carries far more than most people ever pause to consider in an ordinary morning. A history of resourceful kitchens passed down through generations, a handful of quiet minerals working steadily in the background, and a simple, careful process that turns kitchen waste into something genuinely worth keeping. Whether stirred into a morning tonic, folded into a warm bowl of oatmeal, or worked gently into tired hands at the end of a long day, this humble powder remains one of the simplest, most affordable gifts an ordinary kitchen has to offer the joints and the whole body alike. A comforting way to use this same jar appears in a warm smoothie as well, blended into a mix of banana, a handful of berries, and a spoonful of plain yogurt, with about a quarter teaspoon of the eggshell turmeric powder stirred in near the very end. The creamy texture of the smoothie hides any hint of the powder completely, while the yogurt adds its own gentle calcium alongside it, making this a naturally reinforcing, comfortable combination that fits easily into a busy morning without asking for anything extra. Another comforting version leans on a small glass of warm milk, or a plant-based milk if that suits you better, stirred with about a quarter teaspoon of the powder in the evening, close to bedtime. Many people find this a calming, familiar ritual before rest, echoing an old, simple habit shared across countless households long before anyone spoke of calcium in scientific terms at all. Two gentle sources of the same mineral meeting quietly in one warm, unhurried glass is a small comfort that has stayed relevant across a very long stretch of time. A simple bowl of plain yogurt, drizzled with a little honey and stirred with a quarter teaspoon of the powder, makes a pleasant mineral-rich snack or breakfast in its own right, needing almost nothing else to feel complete. The natural sweetness of the honey balances any mineral note the powder might otherwise carry, and the yogurt's own thick, cool texture makes the whole bowl comfortable to eat at almost any hour of the day, whenever the moment happens to call for it. There is a gentle nutritional partner worth knowing about here as well, one that quietly supports everything already described. The body absorbs and uses calcium far more effectively with the help of vitamin D, which is exactly why the two are so often mentioned together in conversations about bone and joint health. A little time spent in daylight, a serving of fatty fish, or even the egg yolk that once sat beside that very shell, all offer a source of vitamin D, making a simple pairing of eggshell calcium with any of these a naturally sensible, well-rounded choice worth remembering. Knowing when to use this powder really comes down to whichever moment already fits naturally into an existing routine, rather than forcing a new one into an already full day. Morning suits anyone who already enjoys juice or a smoothie with breakfast. Evening suits anyone drawn to a warm, calming glass before rest. And mealtime suits anyone who prefers folding it quietly into a soup, dressing, or bowl of oatmeal already being made regardless. Any of these moments works equally well, whichever one turns this small habit into something genuinely easy to repeat day after day without a second thought. Variety remains the quiet secret behind all good nutrition, because the body flourishes on a range of sources rather than leaning on any single one, however useful that one source happens to be on its own. Dairy foods, leafy greens, sesame seeds, and a small, carefully prepared amount of eggshell powder can all sit comfortably within the same varied week, each contributing its own share to the same steady, lifelong goal of strong, well-supported joints and bones alike. Movement deserves a quiet mention here too. since no powder, however well prepared, works entirely on its own without help from the rest of daily life. A short walk, a few gentle stretches, or simply standing and moving a little more often throughout the day all work quietly alongside this habit, keeping joints limber in a way that no jar on a shelf can fully replace by itself. The two, movement and mineral support, sit comfortably side by side, each doing its own small part toward the same larger goal. The story of using Eggshell this way is far older than it might first appear on the surface, reaching back further than most modern conversations about nutrition ever go. Long before modern nutrition science examined calcium in careful detail, resourceful households in many parts of the world understood that little should ever go to waste in a kitchen, and the Eggshell fit that same resourceful mindset perfectly, without needing any explanation at all. Across generations of frugal, careful cooks, ground Eggshell found its way back into food as a quiet, homemade source of minerals, passed down as ordinary household knowledge rather than anything written in a book or studied in a classroom. This kind of resourcefulness tended to run strongest in households where nothing edible was ever allowed to go to waste, particularly in rural kitchens and among families raising their own chickens, where a steady supply of fresh shells was simply part of daily life without a second thought. In many of these settings, the shells were dried near a warm stove or hearth and crushed by hand long before electric grinders ever existed, then stirred quietly into porridge, bread dough, or tea. Exactly the same spirit carried forward here today, with nothing more than a modern oven and a small electric grinder. Building healthy habits around the joints is, in truth, the patient work of an entire lifetime, gathered one small choice and one ordinary meal at a time, never all at once. A single pinch of powder works gently rather than dramatically, and that gentle truth is freeing rather than discouraging, because it means every small, wholesome choice quietly adds to the whole picture over time. Eggshell fits into that lifelong picture with remarkable ease, affordable and endlessly available in any kitchen that already uses eggs, adding its calcium and its gentle trace minerals to countless meals across the years without ever asking for much in return.